On a long drive through the remote countryside, Tom decided to pull into a rest area to stretch his legs and take a break. The sun had just set, casting long shadows over the nearly empty parking lot. The rest area had an eerie stillness, with only a few cars scattered around, and the dim glow of overhead lights casting a sickly yellow hue. Tom walked toward the restroom building, noticing a flickering light near the entrance. As he approached, he saw a woman standing by the vending machines, her back turned to him. She was mumbling softly, but he couldn't make out what she was saying. He hesitated, feeling a sudden chill, but shook it off and continued inside. The restroom was cold and damp, with the faint smell of mildew. As Tom washed his hands, he heard the door creak open. He looked in the mirror and saw the woman from outside, standing behind him, her face obscured by shadows. "Can you help me?" she asked in a whisper, her voice trembling. Tom turned around, startled. "What's wrong?" he asked. "My car broke down," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "I need a ride to the nearest town." Tom, feeling uneasy, but not wanting to leave her stranded, agreed to help. As they walked back to his car, he noticed that the parking lot was now completely empty. The other cars had vanished, and an oppressive silence filled the air. He unlocked the car, and the woman got in, without a word. As they drove, Tom tried to make conversation, but she remained silent, staring out the window. After a few miles, he glanced over and saw her reflection in the window, but something was off. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements. A sense of dread washed over him. He pulled over, his heart pounding, and turned to look at her directly. She was gone. The seat next to him was empty, yet he hadn't heard the door open or close. Terrified, Tom sped off, desperate to put distance between himself and the rest area. When he finally reached the nearest town, he stopped at a diner to gather his thoughts. The place was warm and crowded, a stark contrast to the eerie emptiness of the rest area. He told the waitress what had happened, hoping for some reassurance. Her face turned pale as she listened. "You've seen her, haven't you?" she asked quietly. "They say a woman was murdered at that rest area years ago. She appears to travelers, asking for help, but she never makes it to town." Tom's blood ran cold. He hurried back to his car, eager to leave the haunted memories behind. As he drove away from the diner, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw the woman standing by the side of the road, her eyes locked on his. He drove faster, heart racing, vowing never to stop at a rest area again. It was past midnight when Mark found himself driving through a remote area with no signs of civilization in sight. He had been on the road for hours, and fatigue was starting to weigh heavily on him. Spotting a dimly lit sign for a rest stop ahead, he sighed with relief and turned off the highway. The rest stop seemed deserted as Mark pulled into the parking lot. The only sound was the faint buzz of a flickering light above the restroom building. Unease crept over him as he stepped out into the chilly night air. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Ignoring his instincts, Mark hurried into the restroom, eager to relieve himself and get back on the road. Inside, the air was stale and musty. The fluorescent lights buzzed ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the corners of the room. As Mark washed his hands, he heard a soft tapping sound coming from one of the stalls. His heart raced as he glanced over, half expecting to see someone there. The tapping continued, rhythmic and insistent, sending chills down his spine. "Hello?" Mark called out nervously, his voice echoing off the tiled walls. There was no response. He hesitated, then cautiously approached the stall. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open. The stall was empty. Confused and unnerved, Mark hurried out of the restroom, eager to put distance between himself and the unsettling place. As he walked back to his car, he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her face hidden in the shadows. "Are you okay?" Mark asked cautiously, his voice trembling. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she took a step closer, her eyes fixed on Mark, with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that pierced the silence of the night. Mark froze in terror as her form began to flicker and fade, like a ghostly apparition. Before his eyes, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind only an eerie echo of her scream. Shaken to the core, Mark scrambled into his car and slammed the door shut. He started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, not daring to look back. As he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had encountered something malevolent, a restless spirit trapped in the darkness of the lonely rest stop. To this day, Mark refuses to drive through that remote stretch of highway. The memory of the haunted rest stop and the chilling scream of the ghostly woman still haunt his dreams, a reminder of the supernatural horrors that lurk in the most unsuspecting places. It was supposed to be a routine road trip through the Midwest with my friends, Sarah, Ben, and Emma. We'd been driving for hours, and as night fell, we pulled into a quiet rest stop off the interstate. The air was chilly, the kind that makes you shiver despite the layers. As we stretched our legs and joked about the weird vending machine snacks, Sarah noticed odd tracks in the gravel, large, claw-like imprints leading into the darkness beyond the rest stop. We laughed it off as a prank, or maybe an animal, but I couldn't shake the unease that settled over me. Ben and Emma decided to grab some snacks from the car, while Sarah and I explored a nearby trail. It didn't take long for us to stumble upon something that made my blood run cold. A cavernous opening in the rocks, leading deep into the earth. The air smelled musty, tinged with something metallic. Curiosity got the better of us. Armed with flashlights, we ventured cautiously into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, narrowing as we descended deeper into the earth. Strange echoes bounced off the walls, amplifying every step. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the tunnel, freezing us in our tracks. I turned to Sarah, fear written across both our faces. We shone our lights ahead, revealing glowing eyes peering from the shadows. A monstrous creature, hunched over and covered in mottled scales, its breath heavy and foul. With a surge of adrenaline, we bolted back toward the rest stop, yelling for Ben and Emma to run. The creature gave chase, its monstrous roars echoing off the tunnel walls. We burst into the open air, sprinting towards our car with the creature hot on our heels. Ben, quick on his feet, managed to start the car just in time. We peeled out of the rest stop, heartbeats thundering in sync with the revving engine. Behind us, the creature shrieked in frustration, disappearing into the darkness. We didn't stop until we reached the next town, miles away from that cursed rest stop. As we caught our breath, adrenaline still coursing through our veins, we exchanged looks of disbelief. The monster we encountered wasn't a story or a myth. It was real, and it had been waiting for unsuspecting travelers like us. We never spoke much about that night afterwards, but the memory of the rest stop and the creature that lurked beneath it haunted us. Some things, it seemed, were better left undisturbed in the dark.